So I do work with Mike on Pivot. We try to do something that's a little bit different with the conference, and that is to make it a little bit more human. We're all here today from our life experience, our professional experience. We're all trying to get to certain places. We all have struggles. We all have dreams and aspirations. And the one thing that I try to do on a daily basis is find the answers that no one else wants to find and try to do the things that no one else wants to do. It's someone else's job. It's someone else's responsibility. I don't have time for that. And when you take a different perspective, you actually start to uncover things that you just didn't see before in ways that I hope not just inspire me, but inspire you. So I want to introduce someone that I'm actually very proud to call a personal friend. His name is Peter Guber, and you might know him as the CEO of Mandalay Entertainment. His company, Mandalay Digital, just went public on NASDAQ last week. Congratulations. He has produced a few movies that you might have heard of. The Color Purple, Batman, Rain Man, and now you own the Golden State Warriors and also the Dodgers. And wow, after you became an owner, look at them go.
I'm from San Francisco.
You're in last place.
Well, there's that, yes. But I've asked Peter to come here today because I'm an admirer of his, not just his work and his accomplishment, but because of his spirit and his philosophy. And that's what I wanted him to share with you tonight. So we're just going to jump right in. We're going to keep this short so that we can get you into your drinks and hors d'oeuvres and dinner. But Peter, you wrote a book called Tell to Win. You run teams, you run companies. But the one thing that I admire most about you is that you could have any point just stopped. You could have retired, lived life, but you continue to actually not just do amazing things, you continue to compete for the future, not just for the moment. You're actually trying to do new things. You teach a course at the UCLA Business School. You're teaching students to look beyond what they're learning in regular textbooks. What drives you, and what's the difference between competing for the future and competing for now?
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to talk to you. You know, that's a big question, you know, and I love questions. Questions are really the key to success, more than the answers. And when you talk about competing for the future, it's different than competing in the present. And most of the schools teach competing in the present very well, schools. If you're going to be involved in the new digital world and you're going to have a digitally fit organization, you've got to compete for the future. That's not competing in the future, for the future. Because what's happened in our lifetimes is nobody hits 12, so you all grew up with a number 2 pencil, paper, and everything else around that. My grandsons, you know, they take a magazine, they try to squeeze the thing on the magazine down, thinking it's going to, you know, be a touchpad. It's going to be an interactive piece. So they're growing up differently. But we live in this world, and this is our one life. So how do we have to deal with a world that's changing so fast, no longer linear, at a breathtaking rate, an exponential rate, not an incremental rate, and not even one-dimensional, but three-dimensional. It's moving into disciplinary. How do we do that? How do we compete in the future? How do we make the students that come up in my business school and my film and digital schools that I teach at UCLA, how do we make them digitally fit? By teaching them more tech? Not necessarily. I'm a geek. I grew up ham radio operator, built my own rigs, did all this stuff, ran Sony for many, many years. I was very involved with technology. But the answer is, none of us here are digital. Does anybody here digital? We're all analog. So you have to understand what is really the way you compete for the future. Well, competing in the past, to give you a metaphor, or competing, what it was you would see something that was going on. Take a fishing analogy. You'd see somebody catching fish in a lake, and they were catching worms and night crawlers, and they put it on. And your husband or wife lit the barbecue because you saw the people catching fish. You knew what fish was there, so you light the barbecue, you dropped it in, you felt the tug, and you pulled it up, and you put the fish in the barbecue. That's the way it was when my parents grew up, and I very, very early years. It was very, you know, iterative in the sense you saw what happened, you just kind of copied it, right? And the movement of change was still slow enough that you could get a profit out of that. You can make something out of it. You can make a business, an enterprise like that. And then in the 90s, as the revolution changed and the rate of change changed, the delta changed, the rate of change changed, competing for the future was no longer that way. You couldn't do that way. So how was it? Well, it was like a fisherman who's fishing in a river. He or she has to read the river. He has to know talent, how to tie the fly. What are the fish eating that time of day, in that afternoon? And then he'd have to cast where he perceives the river would eddy and the fish might lie through experience, not through anybody else fishing there, and feel the tug and catch a 10-pound fish with a 5-pound line, have to reel it in using real talent, really carefully. And that's what a lot of us, early stage, we live through, and certainly if you have young parents, they live through it too. But competing for the future is different. You have to cast your line over the horizon where you can't see. And when you feel the tug of something, the trick is not to reel it towards you, it's pull towards it, go to it, and know that you'll have the resources and resourcefulness to meet whatever challenge it is. It's uncertain, but uncertainty is where the result and profitability lies. So the whole attitude has to change. So when you're teaching people information, and information is now democratized and anybody can get information, you know, we used to be tested how well we remembered information. That was like a second ago. But there's no reason to test anybody that way because they can get the information in their life instantaneously. It's how we process it, how we amalgamate it, how we derive from it. So the whole change is so holistic that we have to really bring our organizations to become digitally fit, not by doing more O's and ones, zeros and ones, but by understanding how the oohs and ahs connect to the O's and ones and what they mean for it. So that's one of the things that you try to make the change in your process of educating your company, your institutionalization of your company, how you teach with students. It's pretty much the same. And you go to a more staid organization, you come to the Dodgers, and you go into the stadium, and there's 51,000 people there, 51,000 people in there. And the organization is drawing 4 million people, from last to first in attendance, literally. And you realize, holy moly, this is like ancient. You can't make a phone call. Anybody here addicted to crack cocaine? No, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Quick, no. Do you have a cell phone? Anybody have a cell phone on? You have a cell phone on you? That is crack cocaine. You haven't see it? Just go watch teenage kids sit around a table at a dinner together. They're all on their phone. Watch what they do. Feel the pull on you when you leave home. You could leave your wallet home, you'll drive to work. You leave your phone home, you go back and get it. 261 times you check it's the right number, you check your phone. When it's charging, you go back to see if something rang. You're doing something important and the thing clicks, you go to it. You're addicted. So this whole nature of the audience, forget the artist for a minute, is changing because of that. Not because it's mobile, but because it's interactive. We lived in a world that was push. We lived in a world that was push. It's become pull-push. Not just pull, pull-push. And the digital world and the mobile experience has changed that. These fans want to interact. They've come, they want to participate. They don't want to be passengers. So you have to begin to look at the two ends of the spectrum, the artist and the audience, that's the producing product company and the consumer, you can call them any name you want, as two ends of the food chain. And what does digital, technology, and ethology, and ethnology, what does it do? It either shortens the distance between the artist and the audience, or the producer and the consumer, or it makes the target larger, or it makes it get to it faster, and gives you more information about both ends of the spectrum. So you have to understand what technology offers, not as a feature, clicking the button, but what does it offer as a benefit. So we have to remember that the human side is really the thing that propels it. So that's the change that I'm trying to work on at a school which has been very invested in digital technology, to remember that's great. That's great. You know, but what's its benefit? What does it accomplish for me? What does it make my life better, easier, more fulfilling? You know, what does it do? So you always have to measure in with these companies that you want to have compete for the future, those kinds of considerations.
I love the part where you said that you don't reel it in, that you let it pull you to it. And the way that I take that is this idea, essentially your comfort zone as you know it, your life experience, your professional experience, everything that's got you to this moment right here, right now, may not necessarily be the place that's going to get you to where you need to be in the future. But it's hard to say that you need to not be comfortable and find comfort elsewhere. One of the challenges with that, though, is that I think that there's sanctimony with technology, right? Because we use it every day as human beings, right? We check our phone 260. I mean, I might be double that, honestly. So much so that I had to get one of the Pebble watches so that if it's charging, I won't miss any text messages. But the reality is that we bring that to the decision making as if we are trying to be a digital native. And I refer to this often as the technology trap. What's our mobile strategy? What's our digital strategy? What's our social strategy? What's our 360 strategy? Without even understanding who we're trying to talk to, what's important to them, where they are. And I would love to hear from you as a professor, as a businessman, as a human being, what are the mistakes that we are making when we try to go in and transform our organization by bringing in technology to adapt, to maybe use technology to compete for the future? What are the mistakes we're making and how are we fixing it?
Well, as a human, I can answer that. On the other three categories, I'm not sure. But, candidly, all technology is a cold comfort unless it renders a benefit to either end of that food chain. It's just a thing that does things. And we know where that ends up in the trash bin of digital history. It just doesn't mean anything. Most of the time with our products, if you're aiming for their wallet, you're in big trouble. You're aiming for a transaction. You've got to aim for their heart. You've got to build relationships. And this is one of the great relationships tool, not just an information tool. So we have to think of those kinds of cultural elements when we're trying to make an organization digitally fit. It isn't giving them a big new screen and a shiny new button and a mobile mouse. That doesn't do it. Doesn't make a great race car driver just by parking their car in their garage. So the idea is we have to look at it that way, and I think that's the important thing. And it's hard. It's hard to bring these things, these cultures to these companies, especially companies that are 10, 20, 30, 40 years old, with layered, stratified management. It's hard to. I mean, the guy says to me, but we get 7,000 people in here. We can't get any more in here. Huh? That's not the answer. The answer is, towards what end? How do we build a relationship with our audience? How do we make it so that they're evangelizing our product, that they're wearing our merchandise, that there's 2 more thirst-quenching opportunities, whatever you're looking for. There's another merchandising opportunities, that they become part of the foundation. You start to look at these tools as magnificent, not weapons, but magnificent connectors between the artist and the audience.
All right, so last question. For those who don't know me, my day job is I'm a digital analyst at Altimeter Group. And nights and weekends, I like to pretend that I'm a digital anthropologist. And it was bringing that balance together, that human aspect of things, that really changed my perspective in how I look at the world and how I bring about change, what I'm fighting for. One of the things that I had learned in that example where you talked about driving to the theater, watching the movie, eating the food. There's a book by Joe Pine in the 90s called The Experience Economy. And he talked about, we'll use the restaurant as an example, you're not in the food business anymore. That's just part of the product that you do. It's part of the experience. You have to now be in the valet car parking business. You're in the restroom business because, by the way, Instagramming restrooms is a thing. You're now in the everything business so that every touch is amazing. And so the last question is going to be around this idea of experience. I'm actually fascinated by experience, so much so that a really good friend of mine, Gaping Void, Hugh McLeod, if you know him, I asked him to draw a picture that would transcend for me what innovation was all about. And I talked to him about just everything that moved me, and he just came back with a very simple picture. It's a picture of a heart, just a drawing of a simple heart, and it said, innovation begins here. And it's this idea that empathy can drive an experience economy. When you look at every touch point and you think about then I'm not just responsible for the website, I'm not just responsible for social, I'm not just responsible for whatever, the food, I'm responsible for every touch, bringing these people together. You get it. A lot of executives don't get it. What is your advice to us about how to help people understand the importance of bringing people together in an organization who just don't talk to each other right now?
That's a tough question. That really is a tough question. You have to create a safe space. That's the first thing. You have to create a space where people can be accepted by being vulnerable, where we welcome uncertainty. Uncertainty is where success lies. You have a business that's all about how to and not about what if, you're in trouble. You're a business that's just iterative, you got problems. So you got to be able to create a culture which venerates unique voices, which is, its main hypothesis is questions are very valuable, very, very valuable. And as soon as an organization exerts its superiority over the question or the questionnaire, rather than saying, what is the question asking me, what is the question telling me about the problem or the process, you're in trouble. So the idea is, uncertainty is really where success lies, Brian, and I think it's a focal point, a real focal point to think about. We live in an uncertain world. We couldn't handle, our brains couldn't handle, I have two last thoughts, this one and this one other. Our brains couldn't handle the amount of uncertainty that we really have. You ask us, an actuary, a statistical person, there's a statistical probability the ceiling could crash. There is, they can sure, right now, there's a statistical probability that car could come across the street, we know what's happened, and crash in there and kill you. You worked out every day, you ate vegetarian, you loved your mother, you went to therapy, you're dead. There's a certain statistical probability. You're driving along the freeway. In front of you is a guy that's just escaped from prison. He's driving the car. The 90-year-old man behind you can't even see over his wheel. There's a girl, drinking a cup of coffee, doing makeup, because the guy's out too many, doing her makeup and talking on the phone. And there's a young teenage couple arguing next to you, and they're all going along 65 miles an hour. You think you have certainty? You'll be dead. So the whole idea is we live in an uncertain world. If we venerate the uncertainty, that's where our opportunities lie. We don't have all the answers. There's always a better way. Be open to that. And if you create that culture, if you create that environment, you have the best chance to be nimble, agile, mobile, and hostile. You have a chance to do it all. But if you close that culture, and there's only one answer to everything, and it's, from the top down, and everything is, that's the way it has to be because this is the way we always did it, or whatever the certainty is, you are going to be in the, you'll be done. Just a question of, are you out in 1, 2, or 3, but you'll be done. And the culture can't be sustainable. So that's one thought I wanted to just answer. But I wanted to just cover one other thing that I think is interesting. And it's a fascinating piece because it relates to things that I'm involved with, and I'm still very, very curious about it. And that's this. How do you harvest all the information that we're getting? We have enormous amounts of information that are coming in. Data is actually, maybe more important than the product. You'll put a product up in order to get data, which can sell more product, but you can sell the data. Selling the data is more important than selling the product you have. It's pretty amazing. So we have this enormous amount of data, just staggering amount of data. And it's achieving levels that, I was at MIT lab and they were talking about the number and the amount of data is so, it's breathtaking. And it's big data, but now it's also narrow data. It's also knowing what you do. It has the way, know where you are on your phone and how many times you went in and out of the men's room, how many times you went, they're all tracking everything. Now you all saw what happened in Boston on that marathon thing. Within 3 minutes, they had 900 pictures of every single person in the entire race. We have a world that's capturing us visually, it's capturing us print, our footprint, our economic footprint, what we do, the physical money is going to be gone. Those things you carry around, those little paper bills, in God we trust, it's not going to be that. That phone is your MBNA card. It's here. And every transaction will be able to be traced. Every single conversation. So the question we ask ourselves, is this Trojan horse a dangerous Trojan horse too? It's a larger cultural issue. But it's up to folks like you to begin to at least surface that question. Because we know when you put that kind of power in any government's hand, I grew up thinking, the United It's the greatest. It's the country's, everybody's great, honorable. The president never makes a mistake. I grew up in that world in the 1950s. That's the way I thought. Everybody thought of it that way. And now we know same number of criminals are in government that are in restaurants, that are in high schools, the same number of everything. So we've got this enormous amount of information around that businesses have, especially financial businesses, but everybody has, and the government's tapped into. This is a gigantic, gigantic problem in a free society with that information falling into people's hands. You talk about privacy. Wow. So I was with the CTO and the CIO of the United States of America. And one of them used to work directly with Bill Gates. He was his CTO. And we were talking about this, and they said, no one wants to really talk about it. It's like we want to pretend because we're taken care of now. It's making us feel comfortable. Man, the same knife that cuts your bread could cut your throat. So the idea we have to do is be aware of the fact that this is being built on such an enormous scale and so pervasive and so fast that unless we put a ring around some of these things, we're going to build ourselves a problem that we'll not like. And there's almost nothing being written about it. If you look, you really go through nothing. I mean, these companies are harvesting data. The amount of data they're harvesting and reworking and with their algorithms being able to decide what's going on is breathtaking. Breathtaking. So I know that's a cautionary tale, but I made a lot of movies with cautionary tales and they work.
All right, well, Peter, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Peter Guber.